The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn of Brookwood Middle School. Anya Benson, a book clutched to her chest, sat perched on the edge of a low brick wall, the cool stone a welcome contrast to the lingering summer heat. She traced the intricate braids of her hair, each meticulously woven by her grandmother that morning. A quiet hum of satisfaction resonated within her, a small, private joy in the face of a long school day. Geometry had proven particularly challenging, but the thought of her father's promised ice cream softened the sting of uncompleted proofs. "He'll help me," she thought, her fingers still dancing across the smooth, dark strands. "He always does." A shadow fell across her open book. Anya looked up, blinking against the sudden shift in light. A stocky man in a police uniform stood before her, his crew cut stark against the setting sun. He carried his weight with an air of casual authority, one hand resting on his belt, the other fiddling with a small notepad. Anya's stomach tightened. She recognized the uniform, of course, but this close, the badge, the gun holstered at his side, felt different. Intimidating. She shifted slightly, the brick suddenly rough against her skin. "Ania, aren't you a little far from home?" The officer's voice held a note of casual suspicion, a practiced tone that Anya instinctively found unsettling. She knew she wasn't in trouble. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, waiting for her father like always. Still, a flicker of unease danced within her. "Why is he talking to me like that?" She wondered, her grip tightening on her book. "I'm waiting for my dad," she replied, her voice smaller than she intended. She forced herself to meet his gaze, a quiet defiance rising within her. His eyes, she noticed, were a pale blue, almost washed out against his tan skin. They scanned her from head to toe, lingering a moment too long on her hair. He leaned closer, his shadow enveloping her. "What's your name?" "Anya Benson," she answered, a tremor of annoyance now coloring her tone. "Why does he need to know my name? He acts like I did something wrong." The thought prickled, an unexpected spark of anger in the pit of her stomach. She knew she hadn't done anything wrong. She was just waiting. Officer Reynolds, his name tag revealed, tilted his head, his eyes still fixed on her intricately braided hair. "Benson, huh? Don't recognize the name around here. And those braids? You run away from somewhere in here." The accusation, delivered with such nonchalant certainty, struck Anya like a physical blow. Run away? The very idea was absurd. Heat flooded her cheeks, mingling with a sudden, chilling fear. "No, I live here. I go to school here." Her voice rose, a desperate plea for him to understand, to see the truth that was so plainly evident. Reynolds' expression remained unchanged, a dismissive smirk playing on his lips. "Sure you do, kid. We've had a few runaways lately, all with interesting hairstyles." He reached out, his hand hovering inches from her head. "Maybe we should just simplify things." Anya recoiled, her heart pounding against her ribs. He was going to touch her hair. Her grandmother's careful work, her pride, her identity, threatened by this stranger's casual disregard. A wave of panic washed over her. "He can't do that. He can't." Her breath hitched in her throat, a silent scream trapped within her chest. Just as his fingers brushed against a braid, a firm voice cut through the tense air. "Officer Reynolds, is there a problem here?" Anya's head snapped up. Her father stood several feet away, his tall frame radiating a quiet power. His face, usually warm and gentle, was now set in a grim line. Relief washed over Anya, so potent it almost brought her tears. "Daddy's here. He'll fix this." Reynolds straightened, his casual demeanor vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. "Judge Benson," he stammered, his hand dropping away from Anya's hair as though it had suddenly become burning hot. "You didn't realize what, officer?" Judge Benson's voice, though quiet, carried a weight that settled heavily in the air. He stepped closer, placing a protective hand on Anya's shoulder. The small gesture sent a wave of warmth through her, chasing away the lingering fear. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else, something cold and sharp that Anya had rarely seen. "I believe, that is, I suspected," Reynolds stumbled over his words, his face flushing a mottled red. He avoided Judge Benson's gaze, his eyes darting nervously towards the school building, as if seeking an escape route. You suspected my daughter, a student at this school, of being a runaway? Based on her hair. Judge Benson's voice dripped with a controlled fury, each word a precise, deliberate blow. A female officer, Sergeant Whitaker, appeared beside Reynolds, her expression a mixture of apprehension and concern. She shot a quick, almost apologetic glance at Ania before addressing Reynolds in a low voice. Reynolds, maybe we should, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The unspoken accusations, the casual racism, hung heavy in the air. Judge Benson's presence, his unwavering gaze fixed on the flustered officer, amplified the scene, transforming a simple misunderstanding into a public spectacle. Captain Monroe, Judge Benson called out, his voice cutting across the growing murmur of students and parents gathering nearby. A tall, imposing black man in a captain's uniform approached, his expression unreadable. A swift, hushed conversation ensued. Captain Monroe listened intently, his eyes flickering between Reynolds, the increasingly uncomfortable Sergeant Whitaker, and finally, settling on Ania. He then turned back to Reynolds, his voice low but firm. Officer Reynolds, you are relieved of duty pending an internal investigation. Sergeant Whitaker, please escort him back to the precinct. The color drained from Reynolds' face. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, his eyes wide with a dawning fear. He knew in that moment, that his casual disregard, his unchecked prejudice, had brought him face to face with consequences he had never imagined. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the setting sun casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to mirror the distorted justice he had attempted to mete out just moments before. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the brick facade of Brookwood Middle School. The air, still warm from the day's heat, hummed with the receding echoes of the final bell. Ania Benson, a small figure amidst the throng of dispersing students, meticulously adjusted the strap of her backpack. Her cornrows, intricately woven and adorned with tiny beads, glinted in the fading sunlight. She inhaled deeply, the scent of freshly cut grass mingling with the lingering aroma of pizza from the cafeteria. Just wait for Dad, she thought, a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. He'll be here any minute. A shadow fell across her. Ania looked up, her brow furrowing slightly at the sight of the uniformed officer. He was stocky, his face reddened, a short crew cut clinging to his scalp. He reminded her of a bulldog, all compact muscle and simmering intensity. You, he barked, his voice rough around the edges. Come here. A ripple of unease passed through Ania. Me? She glanced around, half expecting him to address someone else. But his gaze remained fixed on her. Are you lost? He asked, his tone laced with an impatience that prickled her skin. No, sir, Ania replied, her voice small but clear. I'm waiting for my father. Name? The officer's hand hovered near his belt, his fingers drumming against the leather. Ania Benson. She clutched the straps of her backpack tighter, the smooth fabric a comforting anchor in the sudden surge of anxiety. The officer's eyes narrowed, sweeping over her from head to toe, lingering on her meticulously styled hair. A strange flicker of something disdain, perhaps, crossed his face. Benson, huh, he muttered, more to himself than to her. We've had reports of a runaway. Matches your description. Ania's heart pounded against her ribs. Runaway? Me? I'm not a runaway, she insisted, her voice rising slightly. My father is Judge Elijah Benson. He'll be here any minute. The officer scoffed. Right, he drawled, the word dripping with skepticism. A judge's daughter, wandering the streets alone. Sounds likely. Before Ania could protest further, he snapped a pair of handcuffs around her wrists. The cold metal against her skin sent a jolt of fear through her. Runaway situation, he announced, as if the words themselves were irrefutable proof. Hey, what are you doing? Ms. Evans, her history teacher, rushed towards them, her face etched with concern. Anya is not a runaway. Her father is, ma'am. The officer interrupted, his tone condescending. I'm handling this. Please step back. He gave her a dismissive wave, effectively silencing her. Anya's mind raced. This can't be happening. He doesn't believe me. The fear coiled in her stomach, threatening to rise into her throat. The officer, ignoring Ms. Evans's further protests, began to pull Anya towards his patrol car. The handcuffs dug into her wrists, a sharp, insistent reminder of her helplessness. I'm not a runaway, Anya cried, her voice edged with panic. My dad is coming to get me. The officer's grip tightened. He yanked her forward, his face hardening. Just get in the car, he growled, his words clipped and sharp. Anya struggled against his hold, a surge of anger now mixing with her fear. How dare he? The thought echoed in her mind, a spark of defiance igniting within her. She wouldn't let him treat her like this. Just as he reached the car, a deep voice cut through the air. Officer, what's going on here? The officer froze, his hand still gripping Anya's arm. Anya turned and saw her father, Judge Elijah Benson, striding towards them, his face a mask of controlled fury. Relief washed over her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. Dad! Judge Benson's eyes, sharp and piercing, fixed on the officer. I asked you a question, he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. The officer, his face now draining of color, stammered, Sir, I thought she was a runaway. His gaze flickered to Anya's hair, his lips twisting in a grimace. The hair, the description, Judge Benson's eyes narrowed. He took in the handcuffs, the officer's tight grip on Anya's arm, the fear etched on his daughter's face. My daughter, he stated, his voice laced with ice, is not a runaway. She is Ania Benson, and I am Judge Elijah Benson. Now, I suggest you remove those handcuffs. Immediately, the officer fumbled with the key, his hands trembling. As the cuffs clicked open, Anya rushed to her father's side, burying her face in his jacket. She could feel the tension radiating from him, a silent promise of retribution. A female officer, Sergeant Whitaker, approached, her expression a mix of concern and apprehension. She exchanged a brief, uneasy glance with Reynolds. Captain Monroe is on his way, she said, her voice low. Judge Benson nodded curtly, his gaze never leaving Reynolds. He gently stroked Anya's hair, his touch a soothing balm against the lingering fear. It's all right, sweetheart, he murmured. It's over now. But even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't over. This wasn't just about a mistaken identity. It was about the ingrained prejudice, the casual disregard for due process, the insidious fear that had led this officer to see a criminal in a 12-year-old girl waiting for her father. And Judge Benson knew, with a chilling certainty, that he wouldn't rest until justice was served. The harsh fluorescent lights of the Marin County Police Department buzzed overhead, casting a sterile, unsettling glow on the pale green walls. Anya clutched her backpack to her chest, the worn canvas a small comfort in the overwhelming strangeness of the place. The metallic tang of stale coffee hung in the air, a stark contrast to the sweet scent of honeysuckle that still clung faintly to her clothes from her walk home. This isn't right, she thought, her stomach twisting with a nervous energy. Daddy's going to be so mad. It wasn't the anger she feared, but the disappointment. He always told her about the importance of staying calm, of respecting authority. But how could she respect a man who grabbed her off the street, his grip tight on her arm, as if she were a criminal? Officer Reynolds, his face flushed with a self-satisfied smirk, led her to a stark metal desk. He moved with a swagger, a puffed-up importance that seemed ill-fitting for his stocky frame and regulation uniform. Anya watched his every move, the way his hand rested on his holster, the almost casual way he tossed her backpack onto the desk. He thinks he's powerful, she thought, a flicker of anger igniting within her. But he's just mean. The thought surprised her with its intensity. She wasn't used to feeling such strong dislike for anyone. Name, Reynolds barked, his voice echoing in the sterile environment. He didn't even look at her, his attention focused on filling out a form on a battered computer. Ania Benson, she replied, her voice trembling slightly. She wanted to sound strong, like her father, but the words caught in her throat. Reynolds finally glanced up, his eyes sweeping over her with a dismissive air. His gaze lingered on her meticulously styled braids, each one carefully crafted by her mother that morning. Age: 12. She straightened her back, trying to project an air of confidence she didn't feel. "He can't scare me," she told herself. "I haven't done anything wrong." A woman in uniform, Sergeant Whitaker, approached the desk. She had a kind face, etched with lines that spoke of years of witnessing the best and worst of humanity. Her eyes, however, held a sharp intelligence that made Ania feel a flicker of hope. "You sure, Reynolds?" Whitaker's voice was calm, but there was an underlying steel in her tone that made Reynolds shift uneasily. "She doesn't look like a runaway to me." Reynolds scoffed, his face reddening. "Smart mouth, fancy hair. Fits the description." Anya's hands clenched into fists. "Fancy hair?" The words stung, a casual dismissal of something that held so much meaning, a symbol of her heritage, lovingly crafted by her mother's hands. It wasn't just hair. It was a part of her identity, and he had reduced it to something frivolous, something suspicious. The injustice of it burned in her chest. Whitaker's gaze softened as she looked at Ania. "Where were you headed, honey?" "Home," Ania replied, her voice regaining some of its steadiness. "From school. My dad's supposed to pick me up." Whitaker's eyes flicked to Reynolds, a silent question hanging in the air. Reynolds avoided her gaze, his fingers drumming nervously on the desk. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the rhythmic tapping of Reynolds's fingers. It felt heavy, laden with unspoken accusations and simmering tension. Reynolds suddenly straightened, his face hardening. "She's resisting. Standard procedure." He reached for a pair of scissors lying on the desk, his eyes glinting with a disturbing intensity. "Gotta remove any potential weapons." Anya's breath hitched in her throat. Weapons? He was talking about her hair. The sheer absurdity of it, coupled with a very real threat, sent a wave of fear washing over her. She instinctively recoiled, her hands flying up to protect her braids. "Reynolds!" Whitaker's voice cracked like a whip. "Put the scissors down." "She's not cooperating," Reynolds muttered, his hand hovering over her hair. "Take the cuffs off," Whitaker ordered, her voice firm and unwavering. "She's not resisting." She looked at Ania, her expression softening. "He's not going to cut your hair, honey. I promise." The click of the handcuffs unlocking was the sweetest sound Ania had ever heard. She rubbed her wrists, the metal leaving a faint ache against her skin. Relief washed over her, so potent it almost made her weak. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been until that moment. Just then, a booming voice echoed through the precinct. "What in God's name is going on here?" Anya's heart leaped. "Daddy!" She turned to see her father, Judge Elijah Benson, striding towards them, his face a mask of controlled fury. His presence filled the room, an aura of power and authority that made Reynolds visibly shrink. The air crackled with anticipation. The game had changed. The fluorescent lights of the small processing room buzzed, casting a sterile, unsettling glow on the peeling paint of the walls. Ania sat rigidly on the metal chair, the cold seeping through her thin jeans. Each tick of the wall clock seemed to amplify the silence, a silence punctuated only by the rhythmic tap of Officer Reynolds's boot against the linoleum floor. He paced back and forth, his stocky frame casting a looming shadow that danced with the flickering lights. "He looks like a caged animal," Ania thought, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. A caged animal about to be let loose. Earlier, the fear had been a cold knot in her stomach, a dull ache of confusion. Now it was a sharp, stinging sensation, a prickling under her skin that made her want to scream. Reynolds stopped pacing and turned to Sergeant Whitaker, a flicker of something predatory in his eyes. "We need to cut her hair." His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion, yet Ania felt a shiver run down her spine. Her hand instinctively went to her meticulously styled braids, each one a testament to hours of careful work. Whitaker's brow furrowed, a crease appearing between her dark eyebrows. "That's not a thing, Reynolds." Her tone was firm, a subtle warning Ania recognized from her own mother. "She won't let him." Anya thought, a tiny spark of hope igniting within her. She'll stop him. Reynolds scoffed, a sound that scraped against Anya's nerves. Sanitation reasons. It's protocol for runaways. He lied smoothly, his gaze fixed on Anya's hair as if it were a personal affront. He felt a perverse satisfaction bubbling up inside him, a sense of control he rarely experienced in his mundane existence. This little girl, with her haughty silence and perfect braids, represented everything he resented. She was a symbol of a world he felt excluded from, a world of privilege and order. Anya's breath hitched. Runaway? Sanitation? He's making things up. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. Her braids weren't just hair. They were a part of her identity, a connection to her heritage, carefully crafted by her mother's loving hands. The thought of them being hacked away by this man, this stranger filled with a strange, unsettling glee, sent a wave of nausea through her. She wanted to speak, to protest, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. Reynolds? Whitaker's voice was sharper now, laced with a warning he chose to ignore. You know that's not true. There's no such protocol. Her internal monologue was a whirlwind of frustration and unease. This was wrong, deeply wrong. She had seen Reynolds' type before, men who wielded their authority like a weapon, men who targeted those they deemed weaker. She had to protect this girl, even if it meant challenging a colleague. He shrugged, feigning indifference. Just following procedure, Sergeant. His internal justification was flimsy, even to himself. But the urge to exert his power, to see the fear in the girl's eyes, was too strong to resist. He took a step closer to Anya, his hand reaching for the heavy shears he'd pulled from his belt. The metal glinted ominously under the fluorescent lights. You can't do this. Anya's voice finally broke free, thin and trembling, but filled with a desperate defiance. The fear was still there, a cold hand gripping her heart, but anger began to simmer beneath it, a hot, burning ember of indignation. How dare he? She thought, her gaze locking onto Reynolds's. How dare he even think about touching my hair? The metallic clang of the precinct door opening cut through the tense atmosphere. All heads turned toward the sound. A tall, imposing figure stood silhouetted against the hallway light, his face obscured by shadows. What is the meaning of this? The voice, deep and resonant, filled the small room, carrying an undercurrent of steel. Reynolds froze, his hand hovering inches from Anya's hair. The shears clattered to the floor, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. He felt a jolt of fear, a cold dread that tightened his chest. He recognized the voice, the tone. It was a voice that commanded respect, a voice that held the power to shatter careers. As the figure stepped into the light, Reynolds's blood ran cold. It was Judge Elijah Benson, his face a mask of controlled fury. Anya's heart leaped. Daddy! Relief washed over her, a wave of warmth chasing away the icy fear. Seeing her father, standing there tall and strong, a protective shield against the harshness of the room, filled her with a sudden, overwhelming sense of security. She hadn't realized how desperately she needed him until this moment. Anya. Judge Benson's voice softened as his gaze fell upon his daughter, his eyes searching her face for any sign of injury. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his concern radiating outwards like a physical force. The anger he felt towards the officer, the blatant disregard for his daughter's rights, was a burning inferno within him. He barely registered Whitaker's presence, his focus entirely on Anya. Daddy, Anya whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Judge Benson knelt beside her, his hand gently cupping her face. Are you all right? His touch was a balm to her frayed nerves, a silent promise of safety. He saw the fear lingering in her eyes, the subtle tremble of her lips, and his fury intensified. He rose to his full height, his gaze now fixed on Reynolds, his eyes blazing with an intensity that made the officer shrink back. Officer, he said, his voice dangerously low, I believe you have some explaining to do. The air crackled with tension. Reynolds stammered, his care. The fluorescent lights of the precinct hummed, a dull, insistent drone that grated on Anya's nerves. The plastic chair was hard and unforgiving beneath her. She hugged herself, the thin fabric of her cardigan offering little comfort. Across from her, Sergeant Whitaker sat quietly, her presence a small island of calm in the turbulent sea of Anya's anxiety. She could still feel the phantom pressure of Reynolds's hand on her arm, a lingering stain of violation. He touched me like I was nothing. The thought made her stomach churn. Whitaker had offered her water, a juice box, anything. But Ania couldn't swallow past the lump that had formed her throat. All she wanted was her father. The double doors at the far end of the precinct swung open, and a figure filled the frame. Tall, imposing, with a face etched with an authority that even the uniforms seemed to instinctively acknowledge, Judge Elijah Benson strode in. Anya's heart leaped. "Daddy!" Relief washed over her, a fragile wave against the tide of fear that still clung to her. His gaze swept the room, landing on her. In that instant, the stern lines of his face softened, replaced by a raw, naked concern that mirrored her own. He crossed the distance between them in long strides, his presence filling the sterile space with a sudden, palpable tension. He knelt before her, his hands gently cupping her face. "Anya, are you all right? Did they hurt you?" She nodded, unable to speak, the words caught in the thicket of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the sharp edges of his face. He pulled her into a hug, the familiar scent of his cologne a grounding anchor in the chaos. Over her head, his voice, low and dangerous, cut through the air. Who's responsible for this? Sergeant Whitaker, her face a mask of professional neutrality, gestured towards a small, enclosed office. Officer Reynolds is inside with Captain Monroe. Benson's eyes, dark and stormy, fixed on the closed door. He hadn't released Anya, his arm a protective barrier around her. Anya felt the tremors of his barely contained rage, a silent promise of retribution. He'll fix this, she thought, clinging to the unwavering certainty of his presence. He always fixes things. Inside the cramped office, the air crackled with unspoken tension. Captain Monroe, a tall, imposing black man with a face that seemed carved from granite, sat behind his desk, his gaze fixed on the security footage playing on the small monitor. Beside him, Officer Reynolds shifted uncomfortably, his face pale and clammy. The bravado he displayed earlier had evaporated, replaced by a nervous tick in his jaw. He'd seen the look in Benson's eyes. It wasn't just anger. It was the cold, calculating fury of a man accustomed to wielding power. The door opened, and Benson entered, Anya tucked protectively behind him. Reynolds flinched, his eyes darting between Benson and the monitor, which now displayed the moment he'd grabbed Anya's arm. The silence in the room was thick, heavy with unspoken accusations. Finally, Benson spoke, his voice low and controlled, each word a precisely aimed dart. "You arrested my daughter." Reynolds swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "Sir, I thought she was a runaway." "A runaway?" Benson's voice dripped with incredulity. "My 12-year-old daughter, dressed in her school uniform, waiting for me outside the courthouse, is a runaway?" He took a step closer, the subtle shift in his posture radiating an almost predatory intensity. Reynolds instinctively recoiled. "I didn't know," Reynolds stammered, his eyes darting towards Captain Monroe, seeking a lifeline that wasn't there. The captain remained impassive, his gaze fixed on the monitor. "Damn it, Monroe, say something." Reynolds pleaded silently. But Monroe remained silent, a silent condemnation more damning than any words. The footage continued to play, showing Reynolds's escalating aggression, culminating in the moment he reached for Anya's hair. Benson's grip on Anya's shoulder tightened. He could feel her trembling. The memory of his own childhood, the casual indignities, the constant suspicion surged through him. They think they can touch her. They think they can just take. The thought ignited a white-hot rage within him. What procedure? Benson's voice was dangerously quiet now. Justifies putting your hands on my daughter like that? Reynolds opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He looked at the monitor, at the damning evidence of his own actions, and a cold dread seeped into his bones. He'd made a mistake. A terrible, career-ending mistake. Benson turned to Monroe, his voice regaining its sharp, judicial edge. "Captain, I want his badge." "Now." Monroe, his face still impassive, finally spoke. "Officer Reynolds, you are relieved of duty. Internal Affairs will be conducting a full investigation." Reynolds felt the blood drain from his face. His badge, his career, his entire life crumbling around him. He looked at Ania, her small hand clasped tightly in her father's. In her eyes, he saw not just fear, but a flicker of something else. Justice. And in that moment, he knew he was done. The muted glow of the television screen painted the Benson living room in flickering hues of blue and gray. Anya, curled up on the sofa, clutched a plush penguin, its soft texture a small comfort against the storm raging inside her. On the screen, her face, younger and more innocent than she felt now, flashed between images of the bustling courtroom and the sterile police station. The reporter's voice, a smooth baritone, echoed through the room, each word a sharp shard of glass in the quiet sanctuary of their home. Unpaid leave, that was it. The phrase hung in the air, a testament to the gaping chasm between justice and its distorted reflection in reality. Anya felt a cold, knot tightening in her stomach. Unpaid leave. Was that the price for a stolen childhood, for the terror that still clung to her like a second skin? She looked at her father, Judge Elijah Benson, his silhouette a dark, imposing figure against the dim light. His jaw was clenched, the muscle ticking beneath his skin, a silent volcano threatening to erupt. He switched off the television, the sudden silence amplifying the tension in the room. The news report, with its carefully curated narrative, had failed to capture the raw, visceral fear that had gripped her, the suffocating weight of Reynolds's hand on her arm, the metallic tang of fear in her mouth. It hadn't shown the way her meticulously braided hair, each intricate plait a testament to her grandmother's loving hands, had felt like a lifeline, a connection to her heritage that Reynolds had tried to sever with his blunt, unforgiving scissors. They hadn't shown the small, trembling breaths she'd taken, trying to hold on to some semblance of control as the world around her spun into chaos. Elijah poured himself a glass of water, the clinking of ice against crystal a stark counterpoint to the turmoil in his mind. Unpaid leave, a slap on the wrist, a quiet dismissal of the trauma inflicted on his daughter. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He'd spent his life upholding the law, ensuring justice was served, yet when it came to his own flesh and blood, the system had failed her. He looked at Anya, her small frame swallowed by the oversized sofa, her eyes wide and dark, reflecting the flickering embers of the fireplace. He saw the remnants of fear in her gaze, the lingering uncertainty that gnawed at her spirit. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this incident would leave an indelible mark on her, a scar etched deep into her psyche. He felt a surge of protective rage, a primal instinct to shield her from the ugliness of the world. "We're not done." His voice was low, a rumble of thunder in the quiet room. The words weren't just a statement, they were a promise, a vow to fight, to claw his way through the bureaucratic labyrinth until justice was served, until the world understood the magnitude of what had been taken from his daughter. He wouldn't let her become another statistic, another forgotten casualty of a system riddled with prejudice and indifference. Anya looked up at him, her eyes searching his. She'd seen him in the courtroom, a figure of authority, his voice resonating with power and conviction. But now she saw something different in his gaze, a vulnerability, a raw, exposed nerve of pain. It was the look of a father, stripped bare of his professional armor, his heart aching for his child. And in that moment, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Maybe, just maybe they could fight this. Maybe they could win. Later that night, Elijah sat in his study, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the legal documents spread before him. The lawsuit was meticulously drafted, each word carefully chosen, a weapon forged in the fires of his righteous anger. He reread the accusations, racial profiling, unlawful detention, assault and battery, emotional distress. The list felt inadequate, a pale imitation of the violation his daughter had endured. He thought about Reynolds, his smug face, the casual cruelty in his eyes. He thought about the system that had allowed him to operate with impunity, the system that had dismissed his actions with a mere unpaid leave. He felt a cold rage settle deep in his bones, a slow burn that fueled his resolve. This wasn't just about Ania anymore. It was about every child who had been unjustly targeted, every family that had been torn apart by the insidious poison of prejudice. It was about a system that needed to be dismantled and rebuilt brick by brick. He signed the final document, the sharp scratch of his pen echoing in the quiet room. It was a declaration of war, a promise to fight for a future where his daughter and all children could walk freely, without fear, without the shadow of prejudice hanging over them. He knew the fight would be long and arduous, a grueling uphill battle against a deeply entrenched system. But he was ready. He was a judge, a father, and a man on a mission. And he wouldn't rest until justice was served. This lawsuit, this fight was only the beginning. The first ripple in a wave of change that would sweep across the nation, demanding accountability, demanding justice, demanding a better world for his daughter and for all. The fight for Ania was a fight for the future.